Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today we are taking a look at airport development and specifically how, contrary perhaps to popular belief, it can actually positively benefit local communities. To do this, we're going to focus on Luton Rising, the community-owned owner of London Luton Airport and the driving force behind one of the UK's most ambitious aviation expansion projects, a £2.4 billion investment that will increase capacity from 19 to 32 million passengers per year through the development of a second terminal. And at the heart of the plan is Nick Platts, Managing Director of Luton Rising. For the last 2.5 years, he has been immersed in this vast and ambitious project, and last April he successfully guided the project towards the approval of Design Consent Order, DCO, for this important piece of nationally significant infrastructure. But this is far more than a transport and infrastructure story. As the UK's only 100% community-owned airport, Luton Rising channels its profits directly back into local services and community projects, and that's over £500 million since 1997. As such, the project represents not only a major boost for the regional economy, contributing an estimated 1.5 billion annually to GDP and creating thousands of jobs, but also a pioneering example of how growth, sustainability and social value can align under public ownership. So, lots to talk about as we explore what makes Luton Rising model so distinctive and how it navigated the complex, nationally significant infrastructure project process to get to the starting blocks ready to turn their ambitions into reality. So, let's hear more. Nick, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
G'day, Anthony. How are you?
Very good, thanks, very good. Well, big plans you've got there at London Luton Airport. Nick, so kick off. So what exactly is Luton Rising and what's your vision for airport expansion?
So Luton Rising is a purpose-led public airport company. Luton Airport was always a municipal airport, and in the 80s with the change in legislation we became a public airport company. And so Luton Rising is the subsidiary of the council which owns Luton Airport. And over the years that was the focus, and up until probably about 8 years ago we started to diversify into some infrastructure ourselves with the Luton Dart and some commercial development properties around the airport. But effectively, we're owned by the council, we own the airport, and all of that is set up, as you said, for community benefit.
Right. So why now? Why expansion now?
Well, I think the demand for flying is insatiable, and the growth that we're seeing both pre-COVID and since, the DfT forecasts, everybody else, shows us that there is a demand for travel and that's not going away. We want to be part of that. The benefits that we accrue from having the airport here is the fifth largest commercial airport in the UK. That drives a level of investment and economic activity in the town. And at a time when manufacturing has left the town, some big announcements recently, the airport is now the biggest single site employer. And so It's important that the airport maintains its relevance and taps into that background growth that the UK is experiencing.
Well, it's interesting because, when you think about airports around London, certainly Heathrow and Gatwick take all the limelight. Certainly Luton tends to fly under the radar quite a bit, to use an aviation term. But, what's the overall scope of the project? What does £2.4 billion buy London Luton Airport?
Well, it's more than a terminal, I'm pleased to say. So really the focus from the expansion is how do you get more passengers through the runway. So the runway is capable. We don't need to do anything with that. We're making best use of that single runway that we have. But it's slightly inefficient in its current design. So we need to put in some rapid exit entry points onto the runway. That improves the runway throughput. To serve the runway, you need some more taxiways. To serve the taxiways, you need more stands. And if you've got more stands, more aircraft, you're going to have more people. So we need more passenger handling. That's where the additional terminal capacity comes in. And if you're doing all of that, you then also need supporting infrastructure. You need the surface access to be right. And also in the big ticket bill, but often isn't talked about, is those community enhancements that go with it. So we've got a very enhanced noise insulation scheme for those that are affected by the expansion. And we're focusing a lot on the community side of things, and that all comes at a cost.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier the Luton Dart. Just tell us a little bit, what exactly, how do you describe Luton Dart and how does it fit in? How do you plan to expand that whole surface access issue?
Yeah, so Luton Dart is a cableway system that connects the National Railway station at Luton Airport Parkway with the terminal. and it replaced the old diesel bus service that used to run every 10 minutes. And so it was a way of building additional capacity, decarbonising that shuttle service, and providing a much better customer experience. So you now have step-free access from anywhere on the National Rail network into the terminal. It's a short cableway system, so we looked at heavy rail, light rail, and we went with the cableway Doppelmayr system. It's fantastic. If you haven't used it, I encourage you to use it. And it is sized. We built it with the capacity of a bigger airport in mind. So it's future-proofed. It provides a better customer experience, and it decarbonised what was. And it's proving really popular.
So as part of the expansion plans, when you get the new rail systems or the new bus systems going into the airport, you'll have the capacity to take passengers to the terminal.
Yeah, so the conversation now is with the train operating companies to say, look, we've got this great connection, and we've got 2 train operating companies that serve Luton Airport Parkway, both fantastic operators, and we work really well with them. But St Pancras to the terminal in as little as 32 minutes if you use EMR's Luton Airport Express and the DART. And that's all step free. So it's fast and efficient. And now what we need to do is work both with the TOCs, but also Network Rail, or what will become GBR, is how do we increase the frequency of those mainline services, and how do we improve the reliability of those services? Because at 3 o'clock in the morning, when you're coming to the airport for that first early departure, you want to know that you're going to have public transport available to use. And that's what we need to do. For expansion, we need to get surface access modal share to 38%. So we're looking at how do you encourage people regionally, nationally, to use that rail DART connection to get to the airport.
Going from 19 million to 32 million passengers a year, though, Nick, that's a big leap, isn't it? Does that extra demand, does that factor in growth at Heathrow and Gatwick at the same time? Or is this, how does the region support that kind of case?
Well, I think you've got to go back and look at the DCO application. So a lot of the modelling for the expansion was done in the teens, obviously pre-COVID. And you could see even then we knew that Gatwick was looking for expanded capacity. We knew Heathrow was looking at a 3rd runway. I mean, I was at Heathrow at that time myself, so very familiar with that scheme. And the DfT put out their own forecast. So the team back in the teens, 2016, 2017, when they're putting the design together, we're looking at the crystal ball and saying, okay, what if Gatwick has a runway but not Heathrow? What if Heathrow gets it, not Gatwick? What if both get it? What if neither get it? What's going to happen? And I think the bottom line was there was going to be growth. And the only question is how quickly it arrives in the London system and which airport gets it. So our catchment is different to Heathrow and Gatwick. We serve different markets. We're not a hub airport. We don't have huge transfer numbers, negligible, I think, really, in the scheme of things. So we know our place. We know there's growth coming. We have about 10% of the London system market share at the moment. And if you maintain that as the London system, rising tide lifts all boats. So as that background growth comes, and if we hold at 10% market share, then naturally we're going to need more people. And that starts to arrive around about. So at the moment, we're forecasting somewhere around 2030 that we hit our current capacity. And so we need to be ready to grow. And DCO, as soon as we activate the DCO, that lifts the 19 million capacity and we're free to grow up to 32.
We'll talk about what your plans are at the moment. But just going back to the ownership structure, you're community owned. And the Luton Rising owns the infrastructure. Tell us about how you work with, I suppose, the local authority, but also the airport operator.
Sure, it's a long story, so I'll try and shorten it. Late in the mid-90s, the council, some very brave councillors in the mid-90s, realised that the asset of the airport was huge. To exploit and to drive growth and provide jobs for the local community. So they took the decision that they wanted to expand the airport, because if they didn't do it, they'd miss out, and they didn't want to miss out. So back in the day, it was PPP, PFI type contracts. And so they entered into a concession agreement in the late 90s for 30 years to say, private investor, invest in growth, And that's what's happened. So you look at the growth of Luton Airport since 98 from a public-private partnership perspective, it's been a success story. So the operator, it's a joint venture, backed, majority shareholder there is AENA, very, well-established, reputable, fantastic airport operator globally. And their joint venture partner is currently Infobridge. So the concession model we have is unique in the UK. So we're community owned. So the airport is owned by us at Luton Rising. We're owned by the council. So it's effectively council owned. And we're proud of that. It's a unique model in the UK, bringing in that specialism of management to drive what is a really good product.
And I can see the advantages of that community ownership being that the profits go back into the communities. What are the challenges, though, of being owned by the local authority?
Well, I think you're right to highlight the benefits. I mean, since the concession came into place, over £500 million has gone into the local community, either through the council or through the voluntary community sector. And that comes from Luton Rising. So we charge a fee for the operator to exploit the airport, which is normal. We take that fee and we invest most of that in the council and the community. And so the challenge really is making sure that benefit is shared equitably across the local community. You know, we do try and take a balanced approach.
That's a balance between what commercial growth ambitions and public accountability and transparency, I suppose you have to bring in there the whole time.
So, you know, I'll go back to our purpose. We're here for community benefit. We're here to help lift the town out of poverty. So the council's vision for 2040 is that nobody needs to live in poverty. And so we support and enable that. We want to help them achieve that. So all of our activity, be it commercial developments or the airport, is driving benefit into the community, not just financial returns, but social value. And so a lot of our investment cases, the financial returns are low, and in the commercial world, you probably wouldn't do them. But because they drive such significant social value, we go ahead and do it. So we fit between sort of the public sector, which has a statutory obligation to deliver services, and the private sector, which is chasing financial returns. We're constantly balancing the two. But it's important to us that the benefits are shared with those most impacted. So it's not just in Luton, although a large chunk of the financial benefit flows, but it's also the surrounding area. That's managed for us by an independent charity, Bedfordshire Luton Charitable Foundation. And through that, we have a number of pots to make sure that some of that money is ring-fenced to different parts of the region.
Presumably, you must have to have quite a lot of governance structures in place to ensure that you do get this balance between economic performance and community benefit, making those decisions whether you do run things at, I suppose, less than commercial terms to get a better community benefit out of it.
Yes, we're kind of in the middle. So we're neither a council department nor are we a private business. So I have the governance associated with a private company under company law. So I have a board of directors and we have obligations and requirements under those rules. And then alongside that sits the public authority governance. So as our shareholder, they've reserved a lot of the decisions on investments to them. And we have to go through their internal process to get permission to expand the airport.
Sounds like you must have to have quite a thick skin there, then, Nick, in terms of managing the politics of it all. Does that political oversight and local expectations, does it influence your decision making?
Well, I'm Australian, so I'm pretty thick-skinned to start with, and I think that's a great benefit for me. And I've been around a while now, and I've experienced politics everywhere I've been. So every company has politics. And you learn to navigate that, wherever you are, private or public, or in the middle. They're the rules of the game. You learn the process, you learn who the decision makers are and what is it that's important. It takes longer. It can take 5 or 6 months to get a decision, where in the private sector, you might be able to make that in 5 or 6 weeks. So that you build that in. So you just start early. You can't be as reactive as perhaps you'd normally be in the private sector. But when you're operating or you own an asset, £1.5 billion asset, you don't tend to want to react and knee jerk you want to take the time and be thoughtful. So, my whole career has been around providing benefits to the community, be it the Air Force or FedEx or Heathrow, here at Luton. It is, for me, it is about delivering for community benefit. So,
well, let's dig a bit more into your career, Nick. As you say, you're from Australia. You began your career as a pilot in the Royal Australian Air Force. How did that experience, I suppose, shape your leadership style today then?
I sometimes describe my Air Force career as my apprenticeship for management. It shapes pretty much everything I do now. It gave me tools and techniques for sure. It gave me confidence, absolutely. It exposed me to different scenarios where you had to apply rules, but you had to think about the application of that. I think my leadership style, I describe myself now as a servant leader. What I try and do is set a culture here where in Air Force speak, you start with a situation, the context. What's the task, the mission? How do I want you to achieve it? So in terms of the execution of the plan, what is the plan? What's the strategy? What are the tasks that we need to achieve? What admin and logistics do we have? So the organisation we have, the resources we have, the budget we have, and then who's in charge? How do we want to manage the mechanics of communication and who's in control? Who's responsible, accountable? Who's going to be consulted? All those racy type principles. And then sit back. That's my job. Yes, I've been around airports a long time, but I don't describe myself as an airport guy. I haven't been in airports for 30 years. I've been in aviation. Airports is a recent thing. So most of the time, I'm not the most knowledgeable airport person in the room. And I need to let those who are do what they do best. And so I try and set that environment where here's the mission, here's the tools you've got, come back to me if you need more, but otherwise crack on, let me know how you're getting on and let them get on with it. So the Air Force for me, yes, of course, principles like integrity, honesty, openness, that service, public service element I talk about. And then tactics for managing stress. I'm sitting in a meeting going, this isn't nearly as bad as a asymmetric partial instrument approach on ILS, different scenario chasing submarines. I compare it back to that, and every day,
it's not quite as life and death, yes.
Yeah, in my mind, I'm above the clouds flying because that's.
So do you still fly?
No, sadly not. I got 2 kids, 3 horses, and a mortgage. So I don't have the time. And to be honest, I did it for a long time. And for me, flying, the most enjoyable part of flying for me is tactical flying. And unfortunately, the civilian rules don't allow you to do what I did then.
Right. Okay.
So I can't fly low enough, fast enough. So that's fine. I look on longingly as the aircraft fly overhead on their way to somewhere nice.
Well, give us a. I don't know huge amount, but I'm sure huge amounts about military aircraft. But they were fast jets you flew, did you, when you were in the Air Force?
No, I flew the mighty P-3C Orion, which is a maritime patrol aircraft and submarine hunter. And I also flew what was then called the Hawker Siddeley 748 and now BAE 748 teaching navigators. But yeah, most of my flying was in the mighty P3.
All right. Very good. Very good. You mentioned your post-Air Force career, you worked at FedEx and you worked at Heathrow, but you also led Saudi Arabia's first economic zone development. Tell us about that? How did that inform your understanding, I suppose, of large-scale infrastructure delivery?
I kind of fell into that role. I was asked to go out and support Riyadh Airport develop their cargo strategy, having done that at Heathrow. And so my first year, I was at Riyadh Airport and they wanted me to secure this opportunity, the economic zone, which was on a corner of their land. And so I got talking to the regulator and the government officials involved in that project. And through circumstance and various meetings and things that I did in that first year, I was asked to run the project on behalf of the government regulator. And so prior to that, my only experience of infrastructure development was at Heathrow, getting involved in the third runway, and I was the internal cargo specialist. So I sat in a lot of meetings and saw how things were done, but was never really responsible or accountable for it. And so I found myself in a situation where really I was the first person in the company. So we were establishing a subsidiary. So we had a SPV carve-off to sort out. And we had to complete the detailed design master planning for a 740 acre site, greenfield site. And we also had to build the first facility for, well, it's now public, so at the time we couldn't talk about it, but Apple wanted to open a facility in the kingdom. So we had a target, we had a deadline date, we had an anchor tenant, and it was a case of get on with it. Had a great team of contractors and consultants that helped. And slowly, we started to bring in some support locally to build the company up and make it happen. And we did it. We about 3 months late on delivery date, but that was largely driven by Apple's contractor who wanted some changes made to the building. But apart from that, we were there, and you see the success of it now. There's a lot of big companies operating out there now. So
contrast that experience with your work at Heathrow on the Runway 3, which I think you'd probably describe as being a slightly slower burn project at Heathrow. Do you think the Heathrow Runway 3 will ever happen?
That's a complicated question, really, because there is so much involved, and it depends on your point of view, the level of investment required, the construction itself, the complexity of the phasing of the construction, the number of services involved, the earthworks involved. It's a complicated thing. They're absolutely up for the challenge. The guys there are brilliant. And I've no doubt that they can deliver the scheme should they get permission to go ahead. I wish them luck. Well, the DCO process is not easy. It's very long. It's very expensive. But they've got the right people in support. There's a lot of far more knowledgeable people than me to help them get through the DCO process.
Well, we'll talk a bit in a minute about your own DCO approval process for Luton. But just before you mentioned that you're no longer flying, but you do you got horses. Is that what you spend your time doing now? Are you riding horses around Bedfordshire?
I tend to be spending my time either as dad's taxi or doing dad's jokes. Either way, right. I get abused. No.
And how old are your kids then?
Oh, I've got two teenagers. One's just gone to uni, and the other's just started GCSEs. So, no, my focus is them and the house, and I get back to Australia occasionally. I used to sail, but I'm about as far from the ocean as you can get in the UK in all directions. So that's not an option. And the water's very cold, so I'm not sure I'd probably want to do it anyway.
You say that, but I started doing all my sailing around that way, and it's some old clay pits near Bedfordshire. So it is possible. It is possible.
It is, and I did sail on an old inland quarry for a while. It just. It was not the same.
It's a bit chilly. Compared to Australia, I suppose everything's a bit chilly. Anyway, let's talk about the DCO process. You got approval in April. It was a major milestone. What would you say were the biggest hurdles along the way for that then?
Oh, goodness. There probably wasn't one single big hurdle. There were just lots of medium-sized hurdles. The process is defined, but there is so much within that. COVID probably was the biggest issue that we had. We had to take our consultation online, so that changed the way you engage, not just with the community, but with your design team, your planning team, the lawyers, and getting everything ready. So there's so many moving parts and so many elements that you've got to pull together. So we had public consultations pre-COVID. That changed the design slightly. It reduced the capacity. So, I think that there was some thoughts of going higher than 32, but based on that community feedback, we settled on that 32 million level, which is right. But then that just complicated the process of consultation and planning and preparing. And then the submission itself, it's a big document. So it is, I think the biggest hurdle is really making sure you've got the right people with the right experience and you keep their energy levels up.
Any lessons for other similar public sector promoters trying to go through a similar planning process?
So for us, I think it was maintaining that focus on community benefit.
Yeah.
So from an airport perspective, we have this concept of balanced approach where the impacts of expansion of the airport are mitigated in the community. So you balance the mitigation with the impacts and you make sure that you're doing the best you can for those most affected, and you share the benefits across the area that's affected, not just holding on to it yourself. So for us, that was the focus. How do you drive economic growth? And from that economic growth comes jobs, comes inward investments, comes, all the national benefits. And so stay focused on the prize, plan early, allow extra time because it never goes according to plan. And then when you get to the examining phase, you're kind of a passenger at that point, and you just need to allow the process to unfold. The rounds of consultations we faced was higher than we expected, so there were more rounds of questions coming out of the department than we budgeted for and planned for. But that's fine, that's the way the process works.
Do you think the proposed planning and infrastructure bill will make a difference to future DCO processes? Will they make them more efficient, perhaps?
I'm sure it will. And I think anything that gives you certainty on timescales has got to help. Anything that helps reduce the cost of going through helps. Anything that ensures the community consultation is there is all good. I think the thing I've noticed is that there's been a number of airport projects that have been challenged through the courts.
Yeah.
And we're in that process now. So I don't really want to talk too much about our particular case. We're in court a couple of days ago and we're waiting for the judge's decision. But I would just make the point that there's been a number of airport expansion programs that have gone through the judicial review process. Mm-hmm. And the challenges being made are very similar in theme and context. And I just wonder, is that what was meant by the NSIP project? So, I'm absolutely all for challenge over poor decisions and poor projects. The community has to have a right to challenge these decisions. It's legally sound and all the rest of it. It's just the mechanics of it, the process of it. Because I think there's a huge level of uncertainty right now on our project because of this process, and we're having to do some things at risk. And if the process carries on too long, then we'll have to stop investing. We'll have to stop the project, which delays the benefits, and that's not really what everybody wants.
Which, of course, is one of the core parts of the planning and infrastructure bill, is to try to tighten that whole process up, really, around judicial review. I think
it's just providing certainty on timescale, so we can price and plan for a set time period. So it's just having certainty on that, giving the community the opportunity to challenge decisions. Absolutely right. So it is literally just how do you shorten the process? How do you provide certainty, but still balancing everybody's right to challenge what's happening?
Well, what happens next then? Assuming that you get through these judgments, what's the immediate next steps for the project?
So we're still getting on with things. So, as a lot of people might know, when it comes to a project of this scale, getting planning permission is the early step. There's still a lot to do after that. So the concept design that you see in our application, we're now filling in the details on that, moving towards detailed design. So we're progressing towards the REBA stage 1. We're refining the design. The made order we received wasn't quite what we were expecting. So some of the conditions within the made order, we've just had to go back and check, does the scheme meet with those requirements? And I think one of the big things that sat in there that we hadn't expected was the requirement for 12 months of monitoring prior to activating the DCO. So we have to do a full 12 months of monitoring. The DCO says that has to start in January.
This is for monitoring of what, noise and air pollution and...
Yeah, so we proposed a concept called green controlled growth. And within that, there are 4 elements around noise, carbon, air quality and surface access. And we propose that there are limits on those 4 things. And if we can't demonstrate the growth can be achieved whilst remaining within those limits, then we just won't expand. And so we'd said that we would do monitoring to baseline it, but we would do that a little bit later in the process, and the DCO tells us to do it before we start. So it's specified January to December, so we have to start in January 26 or January 27 or January 28. We're targeting January 26, so we're gearing up procurement for that and the plans to put the monitoring in place. We have to do 12 months of monitoring, after which we get some information from the CAA, prepare some reports, submit those to an environmental scrutiny group in the middle of 27, and they will then tell us, yes, we agree, you can release capacity whilst remaining below those limits, so you can crack on. We release that capacity into the market around about October 27, and it would be summer 28 in the aviation, in the airport game. You talk summer and winter season. So summer 28 is where the capacity first starts to appear. So it's a long process, and we're always looking for value engineering the design at 2.4 billion. That's old money. That's 2019 prices. Cost inflation, especially in the construction industry, has gone up, but also background inflation. So that scheme in 2019 numbers was 2.4, and in 2025 numbers it's 3.7.
Right. Yeah.
So we've got to get the price down to make it economically viable, or commercially viable, I should say. And so we're going through the design at the moment, looking at the constraints within the DCO to say, can we do something slightly differently within the constraints of the DCO that delivers a more affordable product? And that's right where we are now.
And the target for actually having an open and working terminal?
So the DCO talks about Terminal 2 coming online in the mid-2030s, around 2035, 2036. But that's subject to demand. So we've just remodeled the forecasts. We don't think we need that 32 million capacity as early as we projected. So that capacity will come online a little bit later, we think, but we still expect to achieve 32 million throughputs in the mid to late 2040s.
Yeah. So for a project like this, what does success look like for the community benefit, as construction progresses? Because presumably the community benefit starts coming through, before it's actually complete and up and running. There's a whole lot of work and a whole lot of activity going on, which generates community benefit.
The first element is the social value. So jobs. We'll create jobs through the construction phase. And as whether we're expanding the existing terminal or preparing for the second terminal, there'll be some building works, there'll be construction works, there'll be trades required to put that in place. So the first jobs appearing will be in that supply chain and that construction side of the industry. And then as that infrastructure is finished, then we move into the service related jobs, so ground handling, security, airline staff, management, airport operations. But it is around jobs, and we've got to create high quality jobs. And when I was at Heathrow, John Holland Kay was my CEO, and I absolutely plagiarised his ambition. And I make no apologies for it because it's fantastic. He always said to us, he wanted the future chief executive of the airport to come from the local community. And I want that for Luton Airport. I want our chief executive to come from Luton Town. And that's 25 years in the making. And so we've got to provide the pathways for the kids today. So we've got to get into the schools to make sure they do the right subjects. They've got the right motivation. We get their attention, get them into the airport, and we can make that happen.
loads and loads of really brilliant opportunity you've got there, and a great project you've got going on there, Nick. So what do you hope the Luton Rising story says about the future of local authority and local authority-led infrastructure in the UK? Is it something which we're going to see more of?
It depends on the scheme, but I would say that it works. So it absolutely works where you've got the right relationship and the right structures in place. You can absolutely deliver infrastructure, quality infrastructure, in a partnering way between the public and private sectors. So, absolutely local authorities should take advantage of the assets they have. Yes, Luton Council's benefit is they had an airport in their borough, and not everybody has that. So use the assets you've got, partner with the private sector, and in return, the community benefits through economic growth, jobs, and contributions either through the council itself or the voluntary community sector. We're the most socially impactful airport in the UK. 50 pence per passenger going towards local community from Luton Rising. No other airport owner I'm aware of in the UK does that. So it's right, it works, and I would encourage local authorities everywhere to look at what assets they have and make best use of them in partnership.
Yeah. No, well, it's an interesting, really interesting story, given that certainly nationally, the government is looking at investment in infrastructure as this, the driver for growth. Any bit of infrastructure asset that they can use to provide resources for the whole community, it can't be turned away. So look, thanks so much, Nick, for joining me today and for explaining this really interesting challenge. It's a fascinating project. You've got a lot of work ahead of you, I have to say. You've got a lot of work ahead of you, but certainly you're on track now, and having got the DCO, that's a great milestone. So look, thanks for sharing it, and thanks for joining me today on the Infrastructure Podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Anthony. Anytime.
Great stuff. Thanks very much. Sadly, that's all we've got time for today, but we have more in the pipeline, more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you'll find background information and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again to Nick for sharing Luton Rising story, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.